That's actually the first time, well, no, second time I've seen the intro.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, Matt was playing around with it. Not you, Matt, the other Matt, behind the scenes Matt. There's more than one Matt here. So yes, that Matt.
Too many Matts.
So welcome to Business Casual, and this is just a fun topic. Matt, you work at ConnectWise. Just tell people what you do there. There's a little security stuff, right?
Yeah, so I'm the security evangelist on the IT Nation team, which means I spend most of my time talking to and about how MSPs handle security, both internally and for their clients. I like to say I'm just an engineer that likes being on stage.
Yeah, and you've been in the security realm for years, working at companies, dealing with security. So this is it's kind of like we've come to the point where we're kind of popular people, but we've also got both of us have a long history of being in the security world and dealing with incidents. And that's how this topic came up, was just when we're chatting about things going, I get it. It's really exciting to talk about IoT, but it's actually because it's novel as the way to get hacked. It's not the most common thing we deal with. Matter of fact, the most common thing we deal with is actually kind of boring. So that's why, oh, look, it's not someone clicking on an email.
It's exciting.
Yeah. So it comes down to threat modeling and things like that. But let's start kind of broad here. Let's see. I think you had wrote in the email when we were emailing back and forth, and I think this is really good, kind of succinct here. There's a lot of exposure, but let's start with, why are you exposing things? Let's probably kind of start.
Yes, exactly. So here's my point on this, and it's not just IoT; it's almost anything exposed to the internet. How many times have you heard of some vuln in ESXi, right, or ILO or IDRAC? And it's almost shocking that anyone gets popped by these, because you're thinking, why is this stuff out on the internet to begin with? So with IoT specifically, you have maybe your light controller, your PBX, your what have you. If you have no need to manage that from the outside, one, if you do use a VPN, and two, even if you are using that, just keep it off the internet. And what that does is it moves the needle, right? So if you have a vuln in your PBX, if you have a vuln in your light bulb controller, now you just have to patch it sometime during the normal patch cycle, as opposed to drop everything and get this patched. And even if you don't, let's be honest, the reality that someone is going to compromise your internal network, and the thing they go after is the light bulb controller inside of it, pretty low. So that's my take on it.
No, it's a good take on it, because this is the thing. Like I'll admit, I fall victim to this. Every time I fly an airplane, I'm a little nervous. I'm like, is my will up to date? Is my estate planning done? But the reality is, I am far more likely to be in a horrible accident driving. You know what I mean? But you worry about it more when you get on. I mean, jets are big, complicated things, and I'm like, this complicated thing could fall out of the sky, even though it doesn't really happen that often. The worry's already there. Maybe I've watched too many movies, and it comes down to kind of having the right frame of mind on a lot of this stuff. I'm not saying don't patch your IoT. Mostly, what I'm saying is make sure we have the right priorities in doing so.
Yes,
that way it's like these. There's just not infinite resources. The problem in your home lab, when you're getting started, you're like, I don't understand how these corporate companies don't patch. I patch everything. And then you work in the corporate world, and you're like, well, it turns out I'm only allocated 20 bodies, and there's this much work that needs to be done. And by the way, every time I update this particular server, the other thing explodes over here, so we have to roll back the patch each time.
Yeah, my line of business app breaks, and I have to deal with that, and not the IoT device off to the side.
Yeah. And so the first thing you want to do is get your frame of mind around, what can you do to minimize your external exposure? Does it need to be, is that better served with a VPN in front of it? And I ask this question on any time when we're doing things. I actually had a customer, I didn't realize they wrote all their own custom database applications for your line of business. But then we started discussing exactly what a web application firewall was. And one of those, they coolly built a lot of their line of business and exposed it to make it easy to inject things in your website, but never really thought about what problems could come with that. And
Yeah,
that,
right.
that is an example of, creating those security exposures more than anything else. And of course, we're there helping them with some other things on the consulting project. But when I just started asking what all they do and what are all these things in the firewall? Why is this open so many times? And what are all these others? Oh, we built our own application. Well, that's great. Maybe
It
let's
might be.
dive into that.
So I'm kind of the opinion that unless you have a public website, that almost nothing else should ever be directly exposed, right? Things like the public website and whatever the interface is for remote access, whether that's the VPN concentrator or what have you. And really not much else needs to be out there open to the internet.
Yeah. Now, one of the stories that we can talk about, though, that I love is my favorite business hacked by IoT example, but it's getting old, but it's still worth bringing up again. There's a incident that happened at a casino where they hacked them through the thermometer controller on the fish tank. And I mean, come on, it plays a great. It
It's a
was
cool
definitely a
story.
fishing technique, right? But we don't have a lot of those. When you look at the actual attacks that are going on from day to day, it's more about business email compromise. The statistics on it are there. Every year, business email compromise. And, if I were to take a poll right now and have people say, what's bigger, business email compromise, unrelated ransomware, just people getting in your email and doing things like sending fake invoices, or ransomware, which is bigger? And if you were to just watch the news, you would go, oh, ransomware, man, I hear about it all the time. You hear about this insert name of large company that was hacked that I now have credit monitoring for the rest of my life for. And, whether they're medical, schools, etc., there's a constant level going on. It's part of the casual news cycle. It's not even in just the tech news. You can see this.
Yeah, it'll hit CNN or those sites.
Yeah, but you bring it all the way around to a business email compromise. That's the bigger threat. That is where more money, substantially more money, is being extracted from companies. That's a wild.
But they're not as exciting, right? Nobody makes a headline of somebody clicked a link in their email by mistake.
Yeah. And what they're doing is frequently the same. They go through, it's the dumbest hack is why it's not even technical when you start digging into it. Wait a minute. They go in the email, they look at your invoices, they look at your vendors, and they start sending fake invoices, or they send a notice. Yeah. We had one of them really fascinating. It was a travel company. So you're not talking about some high tech company. The way I can describe this company's business model is they put old people on buses and take them to places they want to go. They organize trips with older people. So you got a geriatric group of people. So I can describe it, because I didn't know this was a thing. If they weren't my client, or we didn't have called us for some stuff because they got hacked, I would not know that there's a pretty big, they got 40 buses, and they go to pick up all the old people at places, and they take them to a trip to DC or a trip to usually casinos. That seems the most popular. So you're not talking about a high tech company. All they do is put people on buses. But someone got in there, and we'll make up a name real quick. Dan, their financial controller. Big enough, they had a guy dedicated to finance control. Someone was in his email for a long time, and what they were doing is watching. And this is what's really scary about it. Dan regularly messaged the bank to wire money back and forth for things, bus parts. I mean, buses have a lot of money, so they do wires or any type of financial transactions. But they redeposited all the payroll, because they said, hey, and Dan does have kids. Hey, Sarah at the bank, we made a change to who's doing all the payroll for all our drivers. We got that deal because apparently they were working on it. The person knew. Here's the new wire information. Kids are sick. Don't bother calling me as I'm working from home. Sounds great. Let's just wire a few $100,000 of payroll over here. And that's how the hack happened. That was it. Someone was in the email watching based on the logs. They were in there for at least a month or two. No one knew. And they were just logging in, watching, and boom, there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not exciting to talk about. And by the way, it's not in the news because they didn't report it. There's no obligation outside of the federal authority to let them know what happened, to try to claw back money. This is something people should always be asking when they look at the things. It's an example of bias. Kind of ask yourself, how does that news get reported? So how many security incidents when you were in the MSP world did you deal with, and what level of reporting did you ever call a news organization to let you know a client was hacked?
No.
Me either.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to be the one to call the news. Now, did they find out? Different question, right? But we're certainly not telling anyone unless there's some legal reporting obligation at the particular organization.
Yeah, because a lot of the clients are not encumbered under any type of lock-in. So when you start thinking about how these statistics are gathered, the FBI has a certain amount because whenever there's a financial fraud going on, you call the government agency, the bank, and you're like, "Hey, someone wired money where it shouldn't go." You don't always get that money back, by the way. But outside of that, that's a statistic privately held within the FBI that they do reports on. But when it comes to the actual, like as an MSP and someone calls me, like Dan called from the bus company and says, "Hey, this happened," they're not under any obligation. Nobody's personal details, or maybe I let them decide. I said, call your lawyers on this because I'm not the arbiter of this information. But I told them, call your lawyers because you had someone in your email. If you've ever sent social security numbers, that's between you and your lawyers to decide what to do. I don't make that decision. But when you start thinking about how those statistics are covered, this is what provides those bias. And this is why we just want to clarify to people when they think it's not happening to small businesses or it's not happening to even home users, these type of compromises. The business email compromise is actually a way bigger threat than you realize because it just doesn't.
It's the most common by far. Or things like credential reuse or things that are just mundane and not exciting and noteworthy. In fact, so I just thought of this now. So think about the way that compromises or incidents become well known, right? You might go see a write-up on the DFIR report or some blog like that, right? And nobody's going to write about, I just ran into this mundane BEC. They're going to write, hey, I ran into this really cool, interesting one. All of a sudden that blows up across social media. And now we're all sitting here defending against this thing that's like 1 in a million chance likely to happen. Meanwhile, we have some crazy hole or some very obvious thing that we haven't patched or configuration problem, and we're ignoring that to focus on the cool, interesting thing.
Yeah. Now it's kind of funny, and this would be a completely boring story except for the company it happened to. I posted this on my LinkedIn. Once again, credential reuse. There was a site where you can go search through breaches. It's similar to Have I Been Pwned, but they'll actually tell you what the password is in the breaches, which is kind of cool. And I think it cost them $29 for the service to find out all the breach information. So $29 spent. The security good news is the security researcher doing this is not actually a hack. But what made it interesting is the credentials they found was for the IT tooling, the management tools that were part of it. So that allowed them much higher levels of access. And all this would be even not interesting. You're like, yeah, some company forgot to do it. Well, that company was Microsoft, by the way. and it was enabled them to get all the way into all the technicians' desktops and things like that. So the security researcher was certainly playing with fire because they should not have logged into that credential.
That is asking for it.
Yeah, I said, yeah, it is. I'm not going to deny it. It's also scary to me that someone just goes, I wonder if searching these breaches, I could find someone with Microsoft at Microsoft domain. Find the credential works and doesn't have 2FA on it. And he's like, what are the odds? That's what the guy said. It was kind of one of those things like the guy couldn't resist stepping through it because unfortunately, I'm so happy he reported it to Microsoft. He goes, this is why I think they didn't prosecute him because he had a timeline of disclosure and he just did a write-up on it. And I do believe the person's in Europe, so there's going to be all kinds of extradition problems. So Microsoft said, it's probably better if we just change password, put 2FA on this. But he still did a report.
And it's such a good message. Even Microsoft is not immune from configuration drift and issues with having their standards across their entire org. And, to our original point, stuff like that is what's going to get you into Microsoft, not that they forgot to lock down their IoT device.
Yeah. And I think this is a really good one. Henry Tim threw this in here. Absolutely. Verizon does this report. Verizon does a really good job, whether you like the company or not, for cell phones. Ignore that part.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I pick on Microsoft a lot, but Microsoft has some really smart people working there. I just think they have management problems. But to stay on topic, the Verizon report is really good if you want to understand what's actually happening. They pull a lot of research for this. And as security people, we like reading this each year. We kind of pick it up going, oh, cool. These are all the latest this and that's that are going on. You've read that report probably.
Oh my God, I've read it cover to cover. And it's one of the most easily accessible reports to get things like aggregate stats and trends in the industry as far as what you're saying.
Yeah. What is the, I think you got something going on in the Mike's humming there, Matt. Yeah. The Matt behind the scenes is cleaning up the background noise as it's coming in. Yep. That happens sometimes.
Sorry guys, the landscapers are outside, so I'll just
Yeah.
be a little quieter until they're done mowing the lawn.
Yeah, they figured right now is when they're going to do it. That does happen. All right, moving on. Let me grab my notes real quick so I get the next. We had a couple other little things we put in here on that. Some of the security stories related. So the casino database one, like I said, that's a lot. That's pretty fun. We talked about some of the fraud increases. Now, one of the new attacks that's really interesting to me is the Teams attack. It's essentially, I like how we give these people names, or sometimes they name themselves. I think this was called the Black Basta ransomware people. I- it, I like, if if you know if a ransomware is popular or good, if it has like a cool, interesting name. So Black Basta ransomware
Does it have
team.
a
Those
logo? That's the question.
Oh, do they have a logo? Well, that's also logo is like the determining factor if a security breach is like a really big deal. If you did get a logo and doesn't have a cool name, that's
Is there a branding package as far as what color you're supposed to use in reporting on this thing?
yeah. I don't know if you ever follow Kevin Beaumont. He tweets as Gossi the dog. He does his MS Paint logos for his favorite ones. He's a former Microsoft security engineer turned. I would just say really good blog poster and stir of the pot when it comes to things. Anyways, Black Basta ransomware poses as IT support in Microsoft Teams breach. This is something that I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of, and especially if you're in the IT support world, how are you making sure that first the clients that you support are them when they contact you, and vice versa? What are the tells that, hey, one of our team will not randomly pose as jump into your teams and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do this for you, can you click this link? And these are interesting attacks where they're trying to get in between and pose as the IT support. So as a managed service provider, this is something we really are going to start seeing more of. We've done such a good job of locking so many other things down. I believe this is where they're going to move that social engineering.
I agree. We started to we started to see some of that, especially, and it's brought up questions as far as, do you allow external access to Teams? And some don't even do it for clients' sake, right? They're all of a sudden their clients start calling in and messaging you on Teams looking for support and trying to bypass the service queue. But it's a real attack. It is something that comes up with some frequency as far as, hey, here's the survey for the Christmas card list, or the survey for this restaurant we're going to, all of a sudden phishing link.
Yeah, it's definitely it's one of those things you really got to make sure you have the right protections, make sure you have a proper list of people that you should be contacting, and remind your clients this is a good time to interact with them and going, this is why Teams is locked down. If these are those threats you have to kind of mitigate against when you're looking at that.
The other thing we're starting to see, I know we're off topic a little bit, but with that is lots and lots of fake download links for things like IT tools, right? The big one we're seeing is like Advanced IP Scanner, the fake download link for it. So you go on Google, right? You're sitting at a client site, maybe on one of their desktops, and you need to scan the machine. Just Google Advanced IP Scanner. That's a fake ad a lot of the time, and so it just happens to come up. I know it's totally a different thing, but it goes back to the idea of you are much more likely to deal with something like that than some threat actor is sitting in iDRAC on the client server.
Yeah, I think that's probably that's actually a really good point. We had the dumbest incident happen because of that. So it was the IP scanner download one. This happened a few months ago. The companies, this happens frequently in the IT MSP space. What you end up with is the client has a line of business application. Happened to be a company that does golf and banquet center. So they have some pretty unique software. And of course, those companies that make that software frequently get into, hey, what else can we do to upsell the client? Well, why don't we become an IT company and we sell them the software, and now we're going to service the client? But that means on the server, they have a service level account that they have to access, and it's separate from ours. So we're not logging ours. We use, proper just-in-time elevation of privileges, even on servers, but they have to have that account so they can log in and service. So for reasons we don't completely understand over the next steps, other than who the hell did this? Someone logs in with this. We see the golf software people log in with the golf software people account, doing their thing. They have remote access to it. Much as we don't want to, that's just how their support contract works. But they wanted to pitch them on IT services. So we found out that's why they were there. And when they logged in, they downloaded Angry IP Scanner. I'm guessing as maybe the sales guy, they wanted to get a count of all the things on the network. They downloaded the wrong one. And they were just downloading it and our tool stopped it, sent an alert. Download it again. Our tool stopped it, sent an alert. So they're kind of in a cycle of this. Then we grab the screen and we're like, what is going on? Like, we're trying to figure out why it's not just stopping once, it's going. And like, we get a little head scratcher and we call them. They don't answer, call again. Then we get a hold of someone. They're like, what's going on? Oh, nothing. And it turns out they were actually trying to get a bid from the IT people. We're like, well, they're trying to download a virus actively on a computer. Oh, well, well, they wanted to give us a bid on IT. I'm like, well, just to let you know that we stopped them from downloading the virus. So you may want to reconsider them bidding on IT. I do have the feeling they may be cheaper than us, but I'm just saying this is not the outcome you were looking for. Yeah.
Oh, that one always bugs me. I have this pet peeve of doing things on client networks and workstations, right? I used to have techs that would go in, and all of a sudden I see them like downloading all sorts of support and diagnostic tools when somebody's like the receptionist workstation or something. Like, don't do that, right? Use your own stuff for that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and especially when you have a sales guy from a company trying to take over IT, or I guess that my understanding after we sorted it all out was their purpose, but like they don't even bring your own tools or bring in a Dropbox, bring in a box to plug in. I mean, our process, we do, as many mature businesses will do, we're going to do a full assessment evaluation. That's a highly recommended thing. You can't just sign up for a company because you don't. By the way, if you put a master service screen on a client, you just inherited everything that you didn't know about. And so I highly recommend taking the time to assess clients before signing. You gotta find out what's on the network. There's stuff in the ceiling you didn't know about. There's this weird thing their cousin installed in the back room and it's on a shelf somewhere. So you do want to scan, but also the way you do that to do it properly, for clients that are remote, we ship it to them. For clients local, we'll drive by. We bring a box that's got all of our tooling on it. We pre-configure. There's a process. We drop it off. We're going to plug it into the heart of the network where we can get the most access. And it's, go through what if they have multiple subnets or VLANs, however that network hopefully is segmented. Frequently it's not. But I really take the time to assess it. So downloading stuff and loading it on people's computers, that's my least favorite way to do it, because there's also, I don't know what's on that computer. I don't know what could be blocking me, stopping me, or causing issues that would blind me to something on their network. Having your own clean equipment, highly recommended for doing that level of scanning.
Well, and for the rest of eternity, it's going to be, ever since you did that, like, I can't print sideways. You just don't want to end up in that boat. You get blamed for everything that'll happens afterwards. But to your point, like almost going back to the original IoT discussion, segmenting is one of the great, if you're going to spend a lot of time on this, that's where I would spend my time, right? Get all of your IoT devices on some separate isolated VLAN, put them there. That's not a big effort. That's not a big lift. In fact, I would imagine many orgs already are set up that way. Very limited, maybe even no access from outside, limited external access. And that'll get you so much more protection as far as limiting the exposure than dealing with playing whack-a-mole on patching. And you can spend time dealing with more likely scenarios at that point.
Yeah. And that's really, let's come back to that a little bit deeper. One of the things that people worry a lot about, and I see someone saying they disagree, IoT is very vulnerable. Well, it is. There's like the cameras that I have that we install for people. Oh yeah, you're right. I am positive there is a million little vulnerabilities in those cameras that I have, because I have some cheap cameras that cheaper, less expensive. They're not a US brand name one you've heard of. They're, so I did buy them on Amazon. Those are fine. They support OMVIF. They work fine with my Synology. They don't have internet access. Building out a network where they don't reach out. Now, statistically likely that camera will reach out, because I'm talking about cameras that are attached to an MVR. This is a really popular scenario. However, security cameras are sometimes required, often desired, and you should choose a brand that's reasonable. And I don't get me wrong, I like some of the NDAA certified brands, but we've quoted people when they go, I need ones that are all NDAA certified. I need 100 cameras. And they compare 100 cameras to, let's say, a Reolink or some of the other less expensive ones out there that are not completely not NDAA. I'm positive any pen tester would poke at them and go, look at all the vulnerabilities in this little busy box external from 8 years ago that runs this camera. But that's why you put those on a separate network, because they could be a pivot point. But one, those cameras rarely reach out. They're talking back to an MVR. So just as long as no one gets a foothold on your network, that's the biggest thing, is making sure those are separate. There's you can access them maybe, but they don't have access backwards. So someone goes, hey, I'm on there. And more common in your office, once you get a little bit to the bigger businesses, is those multifunction copiers. Those things are also, there's their own little nightmare, but they don't need internet access, generally speaking. They're just contacting some shares. You can usually lock those down so they're less of a pivot point, or if possible, because some of those actually have drivers that choose a model that has drivers that properly support this. You can put them on a separate network and just have rules that control back and forth. If you have really fancy switches, you can have switches that say the firewall rules on a port that say you can't talk to anything until it talks to you first. There's, you get really fancy. That is the ultimate way to lock them down for when you can't just put them on a separate network.
And I think you said it, but I really want to highlight, we're not saying that IoT devices are not vulnerable. They are absolutely vulnerable. They're like some horrible software, something that's thrown together without any real testing. It's just that if you limit the exposure, your risk becomes low enough that you have bigger things to worry about.
Yeah. And let's start categorizing IoT devices a little bit. So the multifunction copier, as long as you have a newer one by one of the big companies, I don't think it's the hugest worry. They generally have some updates on things like that. But if you pivot over to common things we find on a network, Chromecast or Apple TVs and things like that, people spend a lot of time worrying about them. If you have something from Google, from Apple, from even Sonos, I don't put those as the highest concern that you're going to have. Those companies, as much as they may be, and I always joke about this, Google may not be the most privacy respecting people, but they don't like your data going to anyone else. So they do care about the security of their devices. They don't think that all that data they collected about you should belong to anyone else. And so I
agree. That stuff is different, right? We're talking about the Wi-Fi refrigerator or the Wi-Fi toaster or things like that when you think of IoT things that are most likely to have some kind of vuln on them. Apple, Google stuff, relatively safe. And if there are issues, I have pretty high confidence that it will get fixed.
Yeah. I think our friend Cyber Matt Lee here, CIS, it was always going to start with CIS. I didn't have to see it said Cyber Matt Lee. The moment it starts with the CIS,
it's coming.
Yeah, support saying an asset is anything with the ability to store and process data. If you isolate and remove the ability to access data, you lower the sensitivity of the asset. Now, that's a fair statement right there. Following the CIS controls, so trying to minimize things and making sure you know what's on your network. Regular scans are one of those things, like, you got to kind of do it on a regular basis. I seen someone talk about Nmap. Honestly, you can build, and some of the fancier tooling does use Nmap underneath. So if you're a home user, start out with Nmap. There's lots of commercial tools that you can get that'll do this, but not just do it. And I've even talked about even simple things you can do in your firewall, like alert you when any new device is added, or on any restricted network, you can set DHCP to use reservations and not allow things that weren't previously reserved. You can get really locked down. It's tedious, but your security level goes substantially up. So it's harder for someone to plug in anything random. It's harder for that random teacher in the classroom to just add things, because we support schools, and that is definitely teachers will solve the problem. Like, I have 3 devices, but there's only 2 ports on the wall. Let me plug in a
backwards router.
Yes. Oh, I love when they plug routers in. That is my favorite. Oh, look, another DHCP server. Did you properly configure? This is where you get to learn about DHCP guarding on switches. Yeah. Isolate. There we go. There's the theme of a lot of this.
And that's it. Risk reduction. I mean, that's the way we're talking about it. You have so limited resources and so few things that you can deal with on a regular basis, that spending your time dealing with the light controller that hit the news is what got popped. Just isolate that light controller, and every month or two check it for a firmware update. That's really all you have to do there.
Yeah. And one of the things that I point out, I'm holding my phone to remind people of this. A lot of people, when they talk about like the Chromecast, like, Tom, I'm having all this problem getting the Chromecast or Sonos or insert name of a lot of devices where you're doing media casting that has control on the phone. It expects it to be on the same broadcast network. And I tell people, your phone's an IoT device. They're like, what? No way. I don't want my phone attached where the light bulbs are. And I'm like, well, if you want to control the light bulbs, it is. And honestly, your phone, you wander around with it. It is an IoT device. And it really falls in that category of, it's not really, unless you've misconfigured it poorly, by default, phones generally don't have any ports open. So they're fine to be in environments like that. And it's because so many of these devices that you want to control that are in the Internet of Everything, I want to be able to press a button on my phone and make my toaster turn on. Almost always those are tools that expect to be on the same broadcast network to talk to them. And I remind people, trying to segment your phone because you think that's where the security problem is. Once again, you're thinking too hard. You're causing too many issues with it. Just put the phone on the IoT network. That's where my phone lives because I like the Chromecast. I think Chromecast, I mention it a lot because I use it so much, but it's one of those things I always tell people. They're always like shocked when I tell them my phone's just on the same network as your Chromecast. But Tom, the Chromecast is one of those insecure IoT devices. I'm like, yeah, but I like to press the button and have YouTube show up on my TV.
Exactly, right? If you're going to be spending time dealing with phones, less time worrying about is the phone on the IoT network and more time worrying about, do I have something in place to make sure that my phone is up to date before it can access corporate data, right? That's what you should be worried about. The phone on the public Wi-Fi or IoT, whatever. It's no worse.
Yeah, I will say it for sure. And I see that once again, a few more CIS controls to talk about here. 13.4, filter between network segments, and 13.9, as Tom was saying, port level access control. Anyone who hasn't met Matt Lee, it's fun because, by the way, he's not reading these, he's reciting them.
Matt's an encyclopedia of CIS.
Yeah, he knows all the controls very well. I've learned a lot from him because it's funny, if he's like a good dictionary. If you ever need to understand it, you see him, just say, hey, what's a control for this is what I'm trying to do with the control for that. We got to have him on sometime just to run through all that, and I'll show you. He's not looking it up.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Recent audit question: how often do we evaluate potential vulnerabilities? My answer was continuously, but that wasn't the answer they were looking for. My rep was saying only acceptable. Well, obviously,
what does continuous mean? It's not analog.
Yeah, it's not analog, so it can't be just constant. There's a scanning rate, and at some point I can't saturate the network, so it does have to be kind of on a process and a schedule. So yes, because like Patch Tuesday's patching time, it's probably great because several companies, in like Adobe even, Patch Tuesday is Tuesday for them. Doing some type of level of assessment on that monthly basis is probably adequate. It's probably where, if you're a DoD client, there may be more strict rules. If you're a law office, there's probably lesser on there. And you just kind of think about it. And this is something actually really challenging. And I use things like OpenCVE for this, but I don't know. I think tooling is slowly getting better around this, where you take a list of, here's all the things my client has. I love a tool that automatically always tells me, like, spits things out. I'll actually give a shout out to Saslio for kind of doing some of that on the web stuff. They have a really clever tooling they do where it actually tells me if the web portals that my clients are using were involved in security incidents where they should roll passwords. That's huge.
That's
fantastic. I don't log into a lot of these things. Clients all have their tons of lines of business apps and monitoring what not just what's on their system, but where they go, and then notifying me like, hey, they go to the pallet ordering company that I know nothing about. That's where everyone orders pallets, I guess. And then if there's a breach there, well, did they, please tell me they didn't, but maybe they did. We push for password managers. Did they reuse that password on, like, I don't know, their Office 365 account? We should probably start addressing that because it sounds like they had a breach. Those are the things that are really important to watch out for. Back to kind of the question though on the continuous scanning, understand what's in your client's environment, understand where those patches should be. VMware has had some issues lately, as any company does, and I think it's one of those where there's smoke, there's fire. Once you see a class of issues, if there's never just one SQL injection in a piece of software, because they don't refactor, they go, close that hole, and then you're like, crap, 3 more CVEs. And you're like, yeah, because when someone goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. So the first security researcher found it, and there's going to be several behind him going, well, did they try this variation of SQL injection? What are some of your other thoughts on that, Matt, for some of the scanning?
So when I see this question, I think it's It's continuous, but you can't say continuous in the report, right? You literally can't be scanning all the time. So for
Right.
me, I would answer this by saying, how frequently does my tool run an assessment? Is it every day looking for new devices? How often am I checking for new vulns and the stuff that I know is there? And that might be once a day. It might be once an hour, although to your point, that would likely cause some bottlenecks after a while. But just have that documented. I think that's what the auditor is looking for, in that they heard continuous and said that's not really a number that I can write down. So have your answer to that question, and I suspect that would now pass your assessment.
Yeah. Oh, do we have a couple more stories to share? We're right at the end here. I love all the people asking questions, because please, we oh, good. Matt says validate us. As Matt Topper said, that's the best. What does he say? This is write your 7.1 policy to reflect however you can actually run a process for data, then follow it to show evidence of that. That perfect answer on that.
Yes. So the thing about policies, I'm going to soapbox for just a second, is that the time you spend writing your policies is the real value to the policy, right? So often you like see somebody download this bundle of like starter policies, Control F Mad Lib style, and put the company name, and that provides absolutely no value except maybe checking the box that you have one. Making it so that your policy truly documents your organizational intent, that's where the value comes from. And the time you spend discussing and debating what that intent should be, that's where you get actual use out of this. So no Mad Libs is my policy catchphrase.
Yeah. I don't have the direct answer for what tools do you take with you for a potential client for those scans, but one, I have a video called well, if you look it up in my forums, because we broke down the list of all the software we use as an IT service provider, like what we're currently using. You'll find it in my forums. It says Protection Matrix. That if you search for my forums, you'll find it. That has all the tools listed in there. That way I don't have to like line item them all out there. But I did line item in a forum post because the question comes up, and we're pretty open about the tooling we use to be able to do and scan things. And I think Henry Sim brings up a good point here, and I'll bring it back. It'll make Matt Lee happy too. Pushing SASE, pushing zero trust network access. The way I really think of zero trust and where I see it growing is we're really pushing things to identity being the center of all things. You know, whether it's single sign-on, you look at the average IT MSP, and it gets just as expanded for our clients. We have a ton of portals we got to log into. And instead of managing a lot of passwords, we're seeing things move to a single sign-on, so we can then create a session token that allows me to log into other things. It allows me to onboard, offboard people. And we are moving away from presence in the network. So the fact that you VPN'd in, or the fact that you have now, or you're on the network somewhere, you came in through the toaster. your presence on the network is not what dictates your privilege level access. Everything comes down to your identity. This is where the market's going, where everything's going, because it's just easier at that point, especially with all the work from home people.
Your device is always on a hostile network. There is no such thing as the safe corporate network. In fact, in many cases, your home network might be one of the least secure networks around, depending on what you're doing. And like if you're, kids playing Minecraft or something like this background here, there is no safe network. And this idea that securing the network is different from securing the endpoint, right? The endpoint should be self-defending, and that's the direction we're starting to go. It's just always assuming this hostile environment.
We see this with new companies. This is cool working with startups, because they're a very different environment than your older entrenched companies that go, well, as long as I'm plugged in a network, I can access all these shares that are on some random NAS that has no authentication in an open thing. They're like, yeah, well, no one can get on my network, so I don't worry about it. And I'm like, but with new companies, they start out with a different thought process, especially, one of the clients that we worked with, 20 or 30 locations. They just do these, everyone's remote. So they work as a service that helps people. And I won't get into the details of everything they do, but essentially they have a few people working out of the office, but those people frequently go to these clients with their laptops. So there's no concept of a file server. They just have an office with a couple people and internet access. So everything's identity centric. They log into that laptop, and then they log into all the portals that gives them their access to their file sharing and everything else, because they're doing everything essentially cloud-based. So we're seeing the new companies really get that way, where it's identity centric. It also becomes interesting because if they need to replace a computer, the image for the computer is so simple. Just boom, wipe it, reload it. There's not a ton of line of business apps we have to set. This is actually one of those things that is making it a little bit easier to do security from the device perspective, a little bit harder. And that's why I mentioned, like the use of SASL, because now I got to monitor all the different sites they log into. But that's moving to that identity centric is also really nice.
For sure.
Sounds like your lawn people are back.
They are.
Yep. Oh, someone says my forum topic is client defense matrix. Yes, the MSP stack we use to defend our clients. That is the full list of tools. I'm going to make a new one because there's a couple tool changes, but they're very minor, and none of them have to do with scanning and evaluation. So that is a full, really, really long list of all the tooling that we use inside of IT. So like I said, we're pretty open about all that. The last things I'll mention here, because I think it's worth noting. Plex is no problem if you expose it, which is a problem in itself. Any local file access can be done by having media shares. So companies that made it a mistake, we'll just call out LastPass, because Plex is how they got into LastPass. And so while this is one of those things, I guess a lot of people do expose Plex because they want to be able to watch shows while they're on the road or share with their friends, and I get it. But there's been in the past, not recently, but in the past, there were some flaws in Plex, and this is what allowed them to do it. The fact that someone was running Plex on also the system that they said there was 4 people that had signing keys in LastPass. One of them was running Plex, and that was like the whole. And Plex was they were at least honest about what happened. That's how we have all the details. It's not speculative. This is in their own write-up. You can find on their site. Well, I think they just said media sharing app, but Mandiant wrote the word Plex. So either way, this is probably something where you do want to make sure things aren't running on the local computers. And from an IT perspective, this goes down to your controls of people not having full privileges on it. By the way, even me, like my personal stuff, I have 2 logins as my Synology. I have Tom and I have an admin login. I don't even give myself privileges on my system because I use some of the Synology doc tools and things like that. If you get in that mindset where you don't even have full root privileges on yours, you on your Windows box have a login for your daily use and have a privilege login when you need to update software. Even if you're doing this as a home user, we do this at scale as an IT MSP. Your security posture is greatly improved by that. So as you're limiting in scope, even what you can do. So,
well, exactly right. You could very easily click on something you should. Although that does go back to that famous XKCD, the one of great. Nobody can install drivers. They can access all the websites that I may have data in, and my kernel is safe. Well, okay, fair.
Yeah. We should do a whole thing of just XKCDs doing. So you can just go through this. Awesome. They're so relevant to working in IT. But I think we reached top of the hour here, just about at the 45-minute mark. Is your IT Nation? We'll be seeing each other there. So what announcements we got going on here?
Yeah, so the big thing for me coming up is IT Nation. I will be all over the place. If you're there, I'd love for you to come say hi. We'll go talk. Tom and I will be there. It's just a fantastic forum of information sharing and education, right? It's not a marketing thing. It's not a sales thing. It's come learn.
Yeah, I have a few talks I'm doing there. I'm excited. I love seeing and interacting. So I do the talks, but to me, any of the talks, they're good. And then you can keep the conversation going out in the hallway. I love the hallway track. That's what I always call it. Like, you get all the people together. End of the day, us all chatting about all the talks we've seen at IT Nation is definitely like the highlights of it. So it's where you learn the behind the scenes after of everything that was going on. Like, the security incident or this problem. But we come together and we learn a lot there. I'm stoked to go next week. So I'm excited about that. And I think is it tomorrow? Oh my gosh, tomorrow's Halloween. I was saying for Halloween, but Halloween's also tomorrow. I will be doing the Ninja One thing, the IT Horror Fest. So join for that. It's going to be 1 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah, that's tomorrow. Me and Matt, the other Matt, the Matt with the that one. We're gonna be doing that. So that's gonna be fun. It's an IT learning event themed around Halloween. So why not?
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully everyone picked up a few tips here and there talking about security. You think about it from the real world perspective of business email compromise and all that. Always leave your thoughts and comments down below. Head over to the forums. Check out ConnectWise for all their stuff, because they've been sponsors for things, which has been awesome. They've been a sponsor for this entire month, and I'll be at the event next week. So there's still tickets available. Come visit us if you. It's going to be down in
come hang
Orlando.
out.
Yeah, actually, it's going to be awesome. IT Nation Connect 2024. It's I'm so excited because I'm going to be with Pitch It that you got this year. I'm one of the Pitch It judges too. They do the whole Shark Tank thing. Yeah, they do a whole Shark Tank there, and by the way, it's public for people to come watch and listen to the
finalists. That's on Wednesday afternoon. Is the Pitch It finals.
Yep, the Pitch It finals. So I'll be part of that. I got roped in, and well, I was excited because Sean asked. I'm honored. I'm going to get to be a judge, and I was just nervous when I about judging. There's a lot of good. I started looking at the list. I'm like, I like these people. Like I can't.
They're all good.
Yeah, they're all good.
There's no bad answer here.
There's no bad answer here. It was fun last year and a year before, watching them over the years doing it. So lots of fun, exciting things. And thanks everyone. We're going to walk it out here. All right, take care.
Thanks, guys.